How's it going, guys? I'm Austin Proulx with the Wilson Combat Shooting Team and Go Fast Concepts Training. And today we are going to talk about red dots. Now, red dots have been a really popular topic in the firearms industry in the past few years. Wilson Combat makes a bunch of guns that accommodate red dots, one of which is what I'm going to be using today. It is clear. This is my WC EP3. It's a SIG P320 basically with their slide, their action tune, their grip on it, and it's topped with a Leupold Delta Point Pro red dot. I've got a Streamlight TLR1 on here. I use this for competition. I use this gun for law enforcement training and just general range shooting like we'll be doing today. In competition, however, I definitely like using a red dot, and I like being able to have that capacity on this pistol for when I do law enforcement trainings, because a lot of departments are going to red dots more. They're adopting red dots with iron sights, and some departments are even going to red dots without irons. In my opinion, if you're going to be using it for duty or defensive use, concealed carry, things like that, nightstand gun, you should have some sort of backup sighting system. Advantages of a red dot. To me, they come through the most at distance. Up close, you can still run a red dot just as fast as irons. Anywhere from bad breath distance, point blank out to 10 yards, it can be just as fast. 15 yards or so and beyond is really where you start seeing the benefits. The reason is you're superimposing your sighting system on your target rather than having to line up multiple planes of focus. With iron sights, for you, if you're looking at me, you've got your front sight, your rear sight, and then your target. That's three different things that you have to try and line up simultaneously and focus on. Whereas with the red dot, you've basically got your target focus, and then you're just placing your dot over the top of that target. So it's a lot less for your brain to do, it's a lot less for your eyes to do. Not only are you faster at distance, you're more accurate at distance. Coming into red dots, some people have the impression that red dots are a superpower, and that just by slapping a dot on a gun, you will automatically be, twice as good of a shooter as you were before. That's not the case. Red dots do come with some stipulations. That stipulation, for the most part, is that you will have to practice to get really, truly good with it. The two biggest issues that I see people struggling with are finding the dot and trusting the dot. Dry fire training is going to be your best friend if you're new to red dots, whether your gun has iron sights or not. And that'll just be, for the most part, just doing draw and presentation. When you're dry firing, again, empty gun here, nothing inside. Finding the dot using that thumb to point is a really useful tactic when you're doing dry fire at the beginning. Because of that thumb and where you build your good grip, where that thumb lands parallel to the bore here, if I imagine that I'm pointing my thumb at that target, pretty much every time I press out with that in my mind, my dot is right in the center on the window of my optic. When it comes to dry fire, I keep it pretty simple, and I subscribe to frequency over duration. That means that as many nights a week as I can, I'll dry fire for as long as I can tolerate it, because some people really like doing dry fire. I'm not one of those guys. I would rather actually be shooting on the range, but I understand that dry fire truly does have a lot of value. So what I do typically is draws and reloads, and reload variations, because I shoot both IDPA and USPSA. I'll typically do slide lock reloads with dummy rounds and loaded chamber reloads, because now in IDPA we can do that. So my draws, I'm just doing a regular draw stroke. Just slow it down. When you start slow, it's a lot easier to develop good muscle memory with what you're doing. And every time that I do a draw or reload, I want to at least prep the trigger. The reason for that is you'll see someone just going through the motions and say, okay, I did dry fire for an hour, so I'm good now. You need to be paying attention, like I said earlier, how your hand meets the gun in the holster, where your hands are in space as you're coming here, where your hands meet, and how that affects the way you build the grip, with the result of where your dot is relative to the target factored into that whole thing. If you're paying attention to every single step of the way, then that lets you break it down further and further. Is the issue with me not finding the dot how I'm hitting my grip here? Am I building a good grip that would work well if I was actually shooting? How do these things all work together to affect my presentation on the target? I want to imagine in my mind that when I press out and pull that trigger, or at least prep it, the gun's gonna go bang. And you'll find that just subconsciously keeping that in the back of your head, you're probably gonna grip the gun differently. You might focus on some different things throughout the motion. Just imagining the gun's gonna go off in your hand actually does have some effect on the way that you interact with that pistol. I'll just stand there and do draws. trusting the dot is something that kind of has to come through live fire, because again, I can see how much it dances around when I'm actually up here doing dry fire, but if I don't see where that dot was relative to my target and how it was moving through my trigger press, the recoil all the way through, then I can't develop that feedback loop of what I saw versus what the result was on target. And that's really what we're looking for when we're talking about trusting the dot. Live fire is where you're gonna learn to trust the dot. Luckily, live fire is the fun part, and I think we're gonna get to some of that here in a little bit. All right, guys, so we've finally gotten to the fun part of this video. We're gonna do some live fire shooting here. Back to the stuff I was talking about earlier with trusting the dot and finding the dot. We're gonna cover how it actually looks in real life when we're shooting on targets here, live fire, with the thumb aligning with the bore and trusting the dot. Now, I know that you guys have heard Mike Seeclander talk a lot about the dot lasso here. That's what we're getting at when we're talking about fighting the dot. And again, with a good grip, you can see my left thumb is pretty much parallel to the bore, which means it's gonna point about where the dot needs to go. If I just close my eyes and I imagine that my thumb is pointing at my target, my dot was about 4 inches left of where exactly I wanna be, well within the window. It's an easy correction for me to make, even with my eyes being closed. So it's a useful trick on finding the dot before you're actually used to doing it just from muscle memory when you get those repetitions in. Now, when I actually put a mag in here and go hot, the same thing applies. If I'm still in that phase where I'm new to adopting a dot and I want to have that little extra bit of help with finding it, I'm going to point my thumb at the target, boom, it's there. Shots on target. Really easy. Trusting the dot. When I'm here, my dot is bouncing around in about a 1-inch circle right now. My grip can't get much better. Clearly you see I've got pretty good recoil control with the grip I've got, but my dot is still moving. As I start increasing the rate of fire, the dot dances around a lot more. But the thing is, I'm paying attention to where the dot is going before I break the shot, as I'm pulling the trigger, during my recoil impulse, and where it lands again. Paying attention to where the dot is during the recoil impulse, I should never lose it from the window. Because ultimately, a good grip is gonna give us basically, here's my target, here's where the dot is. It should go straight up and down like a sewing machine needle. There shouldn't be much left and right variation, and that'll tell me that that recoil is coming straight back and landing straight back on the target. So even though I might be speeding up quite a bit and shooting pretty fast, I'm still watching that dot the entire time. I'm keeping that feedback loop active as I'm shooting. That'll help you trust the dot sooner and continue to trust it as you start engaging farther targets. So I've got a target at about 10 and I've got a target at about 20, 25 here. Accuracy at distance is one of the things we mentioned. So even though I've shown that you can still shoot quickly and accurately up close, you can also have really good accuracy at distance. Most of those shots were pretty close to each other. You can go back and forth. You can maintain good speed at closer targets and accuracy at distance, even though some people might think you lose the advantage of speed up close. So there you have it. One of my shots up close, I pulled low and left. Everything else is in both of those circles at 10 and 20 to 25 yards. Don't let someone tell you that you can't shoot quickly and accurately up close with a dot, and don't let someone tell you that accuracy is not a distinct advantage with a dot as you start to build distance. Remember, keep that feedback loop going all the time, whether it's dry fire, whether it's live fire. If you're paying attention to the cause and effect of every little thing that you do, until you get the desired result repeatably, you're gonna learn a lot quicker than if you just go through the motions. And again, that applies to both dry fire and live fire as we've seen here. And before you know it, you're gonna reap the rewards of having a red dot on your pistol. Once again, guys, I'm Austin Proulx with the Wilson Combat Shooting Team and Go Fast Concepts Pistol Training. I hope you enjoyed the video we had today. If you like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, drop a like, and hop down in the comments, get some discussion going about what you've seen, what works for you. Let me know what kind of content you want to see more of, and we can probably make that happen for you guys. Once again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you here next time.